Hello, everyone, and welcome to Teeth Matter, the podcast where we talk about the highs, the lows, the truths about what it's like to have a career in dentistry. I'm your host, Ellie Halabian, DDS, and today on Teeth Matter, we're talking about the power of systems and brand building with Paul Vigario, the founder of SurfCT. Paul has spent over 2 decades helping dentists integrate digital systems that don't just make their practice more efficient, but they create the freedom to grow without being tied to the chair. With a unique approach that blends technology, workflow, and design, Paul has helped dentists build practices that run seamlessly, attract the right patients, and thrive even when they're not physically present. In this episode, we'll dive into how the right systems can transform your practice, allowing you to scale, maintain quality care, and create a brand that stands out. Let's get into it. Before we jump into today's episode, I've got a quick but important insight I want to share with you. I was looking through my insights, and here's what stood out. 77% of the people seeing my post are non-followers. That's right. Most of the people engaging with the content aren't even following yet. Now, if you're one of those non-followers, here's why this matters. I'm building something bigger here. It's not just about me sharing my journey. It's about us as a community of like-minded professionals who are here to grow, learn, and level up together. But I can't do that without you. So I'm asking you, if you're enjoying the content, hit that follow button. Don't be a passive observer. Be a part of the conversation. Be a part of this community. When you follow, you're making a commitment to yourself, to your growth, and to be surrounded by a group of people that's pushing the boundaries of what's possible in dentistry. And don't just follow, engage. Drop a comment, send a DM. I want to hear your thoughts, your struggles, your wins. This is a space where your voice matters. Let's create something impactful together. If you're serious about taking your practice, your life, and your career to the next level, this community is where you need to be. So hit follow, let's keep the conversation going, and let's build this into something powerful together. Paul Vigario, thanks so much for being on Teeth Matter. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Ellie.
Oh, Paul, you're a non-clinician. So if someone were to see you in the street and stop you and ask you, what do you do for a living? How do you describe it to them?
We create success. We create success. We create success with entrepreneurs and within healthcare.
Tell me, how did SurfCT come to be?
It was actually a college project. So I was at the University of Connecticut and I was taking my degree in computer information systems. And a lot of jobs were going overseas, which made sense. I'm a very practical person. So if you could get it done for less overseas and it's all remote, why not, right? And I started focusing on what might not go, which at that time I thought healthcare. There's a component of healthcare that's very personal. It's doctor and patient. So we started focusing on healthcare systems. And the idea was born at the university. And it was really a project. It was 3 questions. Could a doctor in private practice benefit from having a full-fledged IT department? Yes. Question number 2, was it financially feasible? Not for one single doctor in private practice. And I don't really like when money gets in the way of a great idea. Like, it was a really good idea to have a hospital grade IT department for private doctors, but individually, each doctor didn't make sense. So I basically wrote a paper that said if you had X amount of doctors, you could divide the cost up and make it a win-win for all parties, so that the doctor in private practice has access to information that they otherwise wouldn't have, and it's feasible for them to do that. So kind of like having hospital power, but within a private practice. And that was in 2002. The university loved the idea and they helped me put the whole thing together. And now you fast forward to 2025, 23 years later, we've been involved in over 12,000 projects worldwide, worked with some of the top doctors in the world and just practices in rural areas. And really, we just see what's possible in private practice. And we see things that a doctor otherwise wouldn't see. Like, most doctors are going to have this cocoon-like effect where you report to the same practice day in, day out, like over the course of 5, 10, 15 years. Us over the last 23 years being involved in over 12,000 practices, it really gives us great visibility into the industry and into what's possible. And then when your first question, how would you describe ourselves? We help create success, because what's happened over those 23 years is I've realized that a lot of doctors kind of have their blinders on. They don't have full visibility of what they can do. And we want to find out where you are, and ultimately, if you could have anything, what you'd want to have, and then kind of take those blinders off and show you a path on how to get there. So it started as an IT project at University of Connecticut, but it's really grown into a global company that helps create success within healthcare for entrepreneurial doctors.
Hey, Teeth Matter listeners, you know I'm all about small changes that lead to big impact. And when it comes to oral health, that all starts with flossing. That's why I love Cocoa Floss. It's not your average floss. It's textured, it grabs plaque more effectively, and the tropical scents like coconut and mint make flossing feel less like a chore. Whether you're refreshing your own routine or looking for something your patients will actually use, Cocoa Floss is the perfect way to make that meaningful change. Use code TM20 at checkout on cocofloss.com for 20% off your next purchase. 12,000 practices, 20 years of experience. I mean, I'm sure when you started in undergrad, that in itself was a radical idea. How have you seen the dental market change in these last 20 years?
Oh, it's been like really crazy. So when I first started, it was like colonials, and you'd put up a little sign up in the front, and it was your name, and it was very like community play. But it was really interesting because as I evolved, I remember in 2006, which is 3 years after, or 4 years after we had launched, I remember I had someone who was in the insurance world ask me. They said, I have a question for you. Is there money in dentistry? And I was like, yeah, there is. And they were like, well, why is my sister a dentist? And she does like okay, but she doesn't. And I said, well, because she's like a real dentist. Like she's like practicing clinically every day. But if you like put some structure to this, you could really, grow something quite impressive. And that was my first conversation in 2006, where I had someone who had nothing to do with dentistry talking to me about the business of dentistry. Interestingly enough, that person left their insurance position as an executive of insurance company, helped their sister formulate the practice, and they just sold the practice last year for over $30 million.
Wow.
Yeah. And you think about it, like if that conversation hadn't happened, she would probably be practicing today. And so how I've seen it evolve is I've seen it go from these individually owned practices to outsiders like scratching their head and showing interest, and then applying some pretty universal business principles to how you run any business, and then really grow it. And then from there, you've seen those individual cases. Now you're seeing private equity, you're seeing larger corporations, because it is a tremendous business. But I've seen it go from individual doctor, and I'm going to have a nice life for me, to we can create something that is much bigger than anyone ever imagined. And that's what's happening in dentistry right now.
It's interesting you say that, because even today, I feel like a lot of people think that dentistry is very mundane, and it's like what we call an ancient industry without much change to it. So you talk about all of this opportunity. How big is this industry, or how big, and what does that mean in terms of opportunity for dentists?
Well, what you're talking about is how they see it is like a stereotype, right? It's like a stereotype that like dentistry is mundane, it's boring. That's just been, kind of baked into like Hollywood and into our, society. But it couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, dentistry has some of the most amazing technology, and it's super exciting. So I think that stereotype will take some time to break, but the reality of what's happening in dentistry is just so extraordinary. It's huge. I mean, I often talk about the size of the industry, and most people don't know. Now some people know because they've been following me, so when I ask the question, they know. But it's a massive industry.
When it comes to notable technology that's changing the way we work, What are some technologies you'd like to highlight?
This thing right here. So this is the number one piece of dental technology, period. And I was recently, um, on a panel, and they asked everybody, what's the number one piece of dental technology? And someone's like, a 3D printer, a CBCT, a scanner. And I just pulled my iPhone and I said, this right here, because you can show your work worldwide and you can document what happens and the world can see it. And we're living in a world today where it's actually not completely ridiculous to get on a plane and fly to New York or LA or Dubai to get really nice dentistry done. And, just 10, 15, 20 years ago, people would say, why would you do that? There's 30 doctors on Main Street. But those doctors on Main Street are still operating with the little sign that says their name that's hard to pronounce, that people can't remember. And then some people have gone a little further and created systems. And some people go a little further and create a brand powered by systems. And if you can create a brand that people want, and you can use the number one piece of technology right now to share that with the world, and the world wants it, you've just unlocked like a whole new level of possibilities within dentistry and for your life.
So tell me, what are some easy steps that somebody can take when it comes to brand development? Because you said it's as easy as having it on your phone, right? And starting that whole process. What are like 3 key steps that you can take to start this brand?
Well, one, every doctor or anyone in business, I really think every person should have an Instagram account. I mean, it's the ultimate way to connect with people. And I'm shocked at how many people still don't. Like they've invested into their schooling and they've invested so much, and yet this simple little step. So an Instagram account. And then I also think it's very important to figure out what you want for your life, because dentistry can really be an extension and a tool to help you achieve whatever it is that you want. So if you can create alignment, so easy steps, Instagram account, and if you can then create a brand that is aligned authentically with who you are, now you've got a device that helps you get your message, you've got a direction that you want to go in, and then how you get there is the system, right? How you can systematically get there. So those are the 3 things I would say. Instagram account, create a brand. I'm not talking about linking up with a marketing company and making a logo. I'm talking about like, what do I stand for? What do I stand for? And then how can I systematically get to strengthen what I stand for every day, in a way that's not just reliant on me as an individual, but there's a real system behind it.
Now, when it comes to SurfCT, how does SurfCT help doctors and dental professionals develop their brand?
So we don't do it to you and we don't do it for you. We actually do it with you, which is very, very different. So if you connect with a marketing company, they'll make a logo for you. And they'll present something for you, and then you'll see 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 or whatever, and you'll pick something. But the reality is, marketing is the act of doing. It's like the act of going to the market. And I would say that most people don't know what they're doing, including the marketing companies. And I would say for doctors, I would say that you're trained to be great doctors, great clinicians, great operators, great surgeons. You're trained to be a doctor. But how could you run your business if you don't have that training? And because we don't do it to you or for you, we do it with you, we're actually helping you create that core competency in-house for yourself. So when our clients work with us, not only do we help them create a brand, not only do we create a system, but we create a very clear path forward to success so that they can achieve that. And that's really what we help doctors. And I scratch my head as to how this information isn't readily available, but when you start to look at the industry and the size of the industry, it makes sense. It makes sense. The industry views doctors as operators. They want you to show up every day and do what you've been trained to do. And that's what most doctors do. And so you show up and you do implants, or you show up and you do cleanings, or you show up and you do, light dentistry or more intense dentistry. But that's an input to output ratio. So you show up, you input something, and then you output something. You input something, you output something. And then the industry sells you a bunch of stuff. They sell you the next gadget, and they sell you the next dental chair. And if you really study that, it's better for them if the doctor is an operator, because the doctor can show up and work and then pay down the debt of the school and the debt of building a practice and the debt of the next gadget. But if you're not careful, 5, 10, 15, 20 years go by and you start to like scratch your head, is like, what's going on? You know, I mean, I paid my dues in college. I paid my dues in residency. I paid my dues as an associate. Now I finally have my practice. Now I'm paying my dues here. And so you're in an industry that has a tremendous upside potential. But if I can keep, or if the industry can keep the blinders on, the horse will race every day, and the industry on the outside will be, you know, really generating the real wealth, making their bets, and their stock will go up. And what we do with doctors is say, hey, listen, like, you can control your own destiny. And so let's figure out what it is that you want, and let's take those blinders off and show you, because you may want to be a racehorse, or you may want to be a free horse and enjoy life a little bit more. And so, like, it's interesting because you're in an environment, in an industry that has a tremendous amount of opportunity, but the way it's framed to doctors is, well, that's not really possible, or you can't really do it that way. And I can tell you that most things are possible, and why that information isn't readily available is because the industry views doctors as operators. Like, as long as you're operating and paying down your debt, the industry will grow. But if you look at the lifespan of a doctor, one of their most exciting days is the day they start their practice, and then 30, 40 years go by, and then they're super excited to sell it. And then they retire for a few years, and then life is over. I mean, that's literally how it works. There's something wrong with that model. There's something wrong with pouring 20, 30, 40 years of your life into a business to then sell it. But here's the bigger question. Did you ever even have a business? Or did you create a space to work in, to be an operator for someone else's business, right? To drive demand for dental chairs, to drive demand for... So it's really interesting. As doctors, you have the ultimate power, but the information you're getting isn't the highest level of possibility, if that makes sense.
No, that makes absolute sense. It's interesting that you said we're creating a space just to be our own operator. What does the ideal look like? I mean, what does that freedom look like for a dentist if they were to use the right systems?
So freedom looks different to different people. So I wouldn't be able to tell you that, but to give you like a general overview, you know, our clients, when they work with us, they start to realize that they're building this space, they're building this practice, but the space and the practice is designed to work for them versus designing a space to work in. So I'll give you like a clear example. We built a brand new practice, and the client decided to go to Italy for 3 weeks in August. Well, the way the system is designed and the practice is designed, that practice is still working and still able to generate revenue while they're away. And surprisingly, you know, they see this impact where they're like, hey, like, in some cases, it actually works better while they're away. And I'm like, yeah, because you're not in the middle, like trying to like, you know, like micromanage every decision. But most practices aren't built that way. There are spaces for a doctor to work in. So I think, you know, as a founder of a practice, your practice should work for you. It should work for the community it serves. And it should work in and of itself for patients and as a practice. And then when you show up to work, that's an additional value. But this idea that if you build a practice and you don't show up, the practice isn't going to work, that's not really building a business. That's building a space to work in. And the industry is very comfortable putting you in what we call the box. They want to put you in that box because you'll keep working and they'll keep selling you the next gadget with some promise that it's going to do something for you, but it's not. All it's going to do is increase the stock price of who sold it to you. Because over that 30 years where the doctor builds a practice and then at the end of the last 30 sells it, these industries have become Fortune 500 companies doing very, very well. And as individual doctors, you'll do well. You'll do well compared to the majority of the population in your town. But if you look at the statistics, as a dentist, you're amongst the top 1% most educated in the world. Top 1%. So why is it that, you can't absolutely crush it? And it's all by design, right? It's all by design. You can't absolutely crush it by design. And I can tell you that if you partner and team up with the right team, and we create authenticity in what you want, that you can have your cake and eat it too. So sometimes we'll connect with a doctor and they want to be more of a mom or more of a father. They want to spend more time at home. And sometimes we'll connect with a doctor and they want to scale and grow. But regardless, we want to break this concept that you've got to be in the space for the space to work. If you're going to build a practice, that practice should work for you. And then if you work in that, that's a whole separate thing, but it shouldn't be like an absolute necessity for it to work. Otherwise, again, you're not building a business, you're building yourself a job.
Top 1% is a statistic that I didn't even know about. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Without giving away too much,
I'll give away all of it. We're super we're super true.
I was gonna say, like, give us an example of a system that actually is beneficial or people might overlook when it comes to running a practice.
Sure. So, just how patients are going to find you and how patients are going to connect with you. So branding is very important, but again, not to or for you, with you, right? So if you look at, a practice and you say, okay, we see 10 patients a day. If we were able to position the practice with the right brand, have the right placement, it's somewhere in the frame of the photo, and you were able to take pictures using the tool that we have here and post them on Instagram. And let's just say, I'm not talking about likes or comments. Let's just say you get 500 views. You get 500 views for photo and you post 10 of them, right? You have the patient post on there. It's just very simple. So instead of having a big front desk, you kind of restructure into a lounge and you create a systematic way to capture the doctor and patient and the brand somewhere in the back. If you post 10 a day and you get 500 views on each, you're going to get about 5,000 views a day. If you're open 300 days a week, you're going to get 1.5 million views on your brand a year. And if you capture 0.001% of that, that's 1,500 brand new patients to your practice a year, 1,500. Now, a dental practice is the ultimate marketing machine in and of itself because you've got the community coming in there. But it's kind of like, a tree's falling in the woods, but nobody's there to hear it. Most practices aren't being set up to show the community that this is the place that people come to, right? So a very simple way to grow your practice is, again, by having it designed properly with a brand that will serve you. And if you had 1,500 new patients coming to your practice every year, and then we could build that in a way where it wasn't dependent on you being there, oh my God, like that becomes tremendous. We actually did that with a root canal specialist, a brand called One Endo. So I met these doctors that were 31 and they were like, this is pretty wild. Like for us to generate income, we have to show up every day and do root canals. And, my family, I want to have a family. I want to have children. I want to spend some time with my kids. And I was like, all right, great. Let's build a model where you don't have to do that. And so they had one location and we built a second one that was fully automated or as automated as we could in 2023. And you fast forward to 2 years later and they're 34 now and they have 11 locations with 14 more coming online this year. And they're not a DSO. Wow. Yeah, they're not a DSO. It's not private equity. It's none of that. It's individually owned by the doctor. And that's tremendous. So what's really interesting about this is that when you work in a practice and you're the operator, you start to connect the dots in your head that the harder I work, the more I make. But the problem with that is that there's a limit to that. There's a limit to how many hours in the day. There's a limit to how you're feeling. Are you feeling good? And we change. Like when we're 20, 30s different, 40s, 50s, 60s, and then we're retired. So you get to a point where you hear someone like me and you say, yeah, thanks, but no thanks, because I don't want to work any harder. And this has nothing to do with input to output, right? Because while they have 11 practices this year, they went on more vacations with their family this year than they ever did before. They each had a child, and now they're having a second child. It's two partners. Now they're having second kids, and they have a lot of vacations planned. So none of this is about more input. This is about working smarter, not harder. And so really realizing the difference between I'm going to build a practice that works for me versus I'm going to talk to my colleagues in Facebook groups and in WhatsApp messages and in text messages, and I'm going to all ask my colleagues for advice. And my colleagues are getting advice from the industry, but then from other colleagues who got advice from the industry. And doctors are just getting the wrong information. You're just getting the wrong information. And because you have a high earning potential, like it'll work, but the only way it works is when you work. And if you're amongst the top 1% educated in the world, why is there so much manual labor coming your way? And I'm not, saying that there's anything wrong with manual labor, but work smarter, not harder, and build something that people want and that serves the community and patients. The most fascinating part about this whole thing is that everybody benefits from a better practice, right? And I always like to say the world doesn't need more practices, it needs better ones. So
No, I'm all about working smarter, not harder. And it's this whole conversation is about how to do dentistry differently. And I'm curious to know, you've said as dentists, we invest in ourselves so much, and we're just working to kind of pay off the bills, pay off the debt. But how much should we allocate to marketing? How much of it should we allocate to technology in order to build out a practice that's efficient?
yeah, so $0 to marketing, and when I say that, people are always somewhat shocked, and I mean that. So
I'm shocked.
yeah, so paying a marketing company to market for you, you might as well start a fire in the backyard and just throw the money into the fire, right? They'll get you some patients, but it's not like our clients don't actually do marketing. We create systems that will create a brand that does it for you. So when I was describing to you kind of how to take that picture in your practice and how to have the right positioning, that's a system that's really a technology system. But once you have that, it will just market for you. So you don't have to do, our company is global. We do work in Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Australia, Canada, Brazil, and we don't have any pay per click. We don't, in fact, if you go on Google and you search SurfCT, you'll see these Fortune 500 companies all using keywords to try to get ahead of us. But the reason why people are searching for SurfCT is because we've got a systematic approach. So actually $0 for marketing, and the budget on how we do this is, let's actually take a look at what's really possible. So we don't build dental practices the way most dental practices look. Our practices don't have a front desk, and there's a reason for that. I mean, think about it. In what business do you want the person's first impression to be people busy on a phone, potentially talking about money or insurance while the patient's walking in? That whole mechanism is just absolutely incorrect. But if I build it that way, then I can sell you more terminals, and I can sell you software that does this and fancier phone systems. So it's funny when doctors work with us, they're always shocked at how much more affordable it is to build a dental practice. And then I think their next moment of shockness is oh my God, this thing works without me. And those are the two really key elements. It's actually the reason why it's expensive to build a practice is because the industry is positioning you like that. And they're telling you need a $50,000 dental chair or whatever. And, these front desks, I don't know if you've ever tried to build a practice, but, they charge $100,000 for this arch that looks like it's from the 1980s. And then forget about that. Then they put 3 to 4 people up there, which human capital is the most expensive thing. Well, guess what? When you don't build a front desk, you don't have 3 or 4 people up there trying to do that. And interestingly enough, with the technology that's available, you can build a business office, put 1 or 2 people that will output and outcreate 3 or 4 people at a front desk the whole time. So it's actually not more expensive to work with us. It's tremendously less expensive. And it's not siloed. So it's not like there's marketing here and there's an IT budget here. I love these consultants where you're building a practice and they create these separate silos. And essentially what you're going to end up is you're going to end up with a lot of stuff that you paid for, but none of it works together. And our saying is everything is connected, because if we do this right, we're going to hit one domino and all of the dominoes are going to fall, and they're going to fall in the direction that you want to go in, which also is amazing for the team, right? Because when the team comes in, they're not trying to figure out what to do. They know how to do it. So if I give you an analogy, it's like you could open up a local coffee shop and try to figure it all out, or you could build a Starbucks in which people want that. People want, like if your significant other says, Ellie, I'd like to get a Frappuccino this morning, you can't come back with like gas station coffee and say this was 99 cents. Like like that's not going to work. So when you could build a local coffee shop and start from zero and try to figure it all out on your own, it'd take you 10, 15 years to figure it out. And then you make some money for the next, 10 or 15 years and then you sell it. Or you can open up a Blue Bottle or a Starbucks or something that people want and that works for you. The owners aren't there. The baristas are there, but the owners aren't there. So our model, not only is it more affordable, but it's actually an interesting one, because when associates come work, they're more successful. Patients are more successful. That's pretty cool.
You mentioned not having like a front desk, and it's an experience that I've encountered. You go with it, they're on the phone, they're like, "Oh, we'll be with you in a minute." And if you remove that element, does that I would think that that takes away from maybe the intimacy, right, or the connection when it comes to finding a provider. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So if you just look at it in a silo and you just say, oh my God, I saw a podcast and now I'm going to take out my front desk, you're absolutely correct. You can't just take it out. But if you look at it as a system, you can actually increase the intimacy, right? Because now you can have a host who comes out and greets you and says, Ellie, welcome to the practice. I noticed you filled out your forms or you didn't. Here's an iPad. If you need help, I can help you fill it out. And by the way, on your way in, when the text message went to your phone and asked you what your favorite drink was, you said you really like tea, and here's your tea. And so I'm actually increasing the connectivity with you. And that host doesn't have to be an insurance expert. They don't have to fight the phone. But interestingly enough, that same host is going to be the host that's going to take that photo that's going to end up on Ellie's Instagram, where Ellie has 300, 400, 500 followers that are going to say, oh, you go to that practice. So again, back to those dominoes, this is an entire like systematic approach. But what's really fascinating about it is when you do it right, the dental practice becomes the ultimate marketing engine. Patients want to go there. And you've reduced the cost of building this thing, and you've also reduced the cost of maintaining this thing, because you don't need 3 or 4 pilots at the front. You need one pilot, quite frankly, who's less qualified. They just have to be a friendly person who can greet people and then capture the shot. And here's what's really fascinating. People will see my lecture. We have an outside the box lecture. It's very well attended. And they have these big front desks with 4 people. And if you try to get someone at one of those front desks to capture these pictures that will inevitably bring you more new patients, they can't, because they're either on the phone or they were waiting for the insurance company or they got interrupted. So more chefs in the kitchen actually creates more confusion. And when you can dial that back and align it, and here's the other thing, the technologies available today to do it are so different than they've ever been. So why are the dental practices being built the same exact way? And the reason for it is, doctors are getting free layouts from the industry, and the industry wants to sell you stuff, right? And I'll give you a really simple analogy. I'm building a house, and Restoration Hardware offered us a free layout. And just because I found that so fascinating, we have an architect and we're doing it the right way, I said, yeah, I'd love to see the layout. And guess what they did? They built as many bedrooms as possible because they want to sell us beds and bedroom furniture. And they actually made the kitchen pretty small. And you know why? Because they don't sell kitchen stuff. So these layouts that are from the 1990s that doctors are still using in 2025 are, again, designed to create a space for you to work in. And if you take like this podcast and you say, oh my God, I'm going to remove my front desk, you're right. It's going to create less intimacy in that area because you can't just remove one piece. But if you're building a practice and you look at it like holistically and how it should work, you can build them lighter and much more appealing and desirable, much more profitable, and ultimately much more fun and enjoyable to work in, be in, go as a patient, because you can have more connection, whether it's intimacy or it's checking in and checking out or clinical. You can have more connection along the way with the proper design versus have this barrier in the middle with you where you're just trying to survive. I mean, most front desks in most practices, not a place you'd want to be at. And in fact, I'd encourage any doctor listening to this tomorrow, go to your practice and try to spend 20 minutes at your front desk. You'll see the survival that people are in, and it'll be uncomfortable. You'll want to leave. And so just to eliminate that, and that's possible today because of the technologies that are available. So I'll give you one last analogy, but as a kid, I used to go through tolls and the toll would be down and the car would stop. And I never understood why the toll person was so grumpy. I mean, I'm this kid sitting in the back seat of my dad's, car. And
I remember those days.
Yeah. And you're like, why is this person so grumpy? Like, life is great, but they're constantly just in survival mode. Right. And today we drive by that and there is no grumpy person, and you drive by at, 60, 70 miles an hour, and it's just much more efficient. And so eliminate the grumpy person at your front desk, just get rid of it and create a level of efficiency that people really like. Because you said you remember those days, but would you want to go back to that? Would you want to go back to that? So the technology has allowed the design to change. So it's interesting. Pixar's got this saying that technology inspires design and design inspires technology. And that's actually how this all works, right? Because when we work with architects, they're always shocked at how much we know about this. And they're like, are you guys architects? And we're like, no, we're not architects. And they're like, how do you guys know so much? And I was like, well, we were on the forefront of designing this technology. And as we designed technology that made things more efficient, we started to question the design. And when you start to simplify the design and the technology and design are working together, you can start to create automation. And when you can automate an experience that people want, and when I say people want, doctors want to do their procedures and patients want the procedure. And if you can create that healthy dynamic, you're going to create massive success. And that's exactly what we do. We help doctors create success.
What would you say to a dental professional who's hesitant about integrating technology or automating these practices?
I would say that you got to surround yourself with the right team, because the right team is going to really make this seamless and flawless, right? So, if you're talking to someone about a printer and you're talking to someone about a scanner and you're talking to someone about these different pieces, it reminds me again of, when we were growing up, you would travel and you'd have the Walkman on you, and then you'd have a camera on you, and then your dad had a big cell phone, and then you had like all of this. You had a CD player, and then you had like something to take your notes on, a notepad. But if you talk to the right team, you can create like the whole thing, and it's super simple. Like, an iPhone isn't intimidating. It's just got everything you need. So I am not, this is going to sound like a shocking thing, but I am not a proponent of adding technology to a practice. Like, in and of itself, like, I don't think you should just add new technology. Like, think about it. Like, you look at the 737 Max, like that plane, it just kept falling out of the sky at first because it had new technology. Nobody wanted to get on them. This idea that we should be adding new technology to practices is not at all what I'm talking about. I'm talking about creating a system that we know works. So when you look at that plane that just fell out of the sky because it had new technology that nobody understood, that's what's going to create hesitancy in a clinician. And they're like, I don't even want to deal with this. But if you look at this thing systematically and you build something that's a complete system, then it's going to feel fluid and it's going to feel good. And, Mark Cuban has a saying that sales cures all. And sales is a very uncomfortable word in healthcare, but let's not have to sell it. Let's create it where patients want it. Like, when you walk into a Starbucks, are they like, hey, listen, instead of 99-cent coffee, you should buy a $7 Frappuccino? They don't say that. You say, I want a Frappuccino, and they say that'll be $7. And when you really contemplate that, because you want it, it's okay. But go tell your grandparents you pay $7 for a cup of coffee. They'll probably think you're crazy. So implementing technology for the sake of implementing technology because someone in a Facebook group told you to do that is, probably should create some level of anxiety, and it'll probably create some headaches. Understanding that the information doctors are getting is not the best information for their success. It's the best information for the industry. And if you can surround yourself with the right people and you can ask questions and you can really get somewhere really clear. So for anyone listening to this podcast, it's super easy, right? We're on Instagram. It's a DM away. You just drop us a DM and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you guys. And we don't start by telling you what to do. We start by saying, okay, where are you? Like, where did you start? Where are you today? And if you could have anything at all, what would you want? And they say, well, I want this, but I talked to my professor and he said this wasn't possible. And then I talked to this rep that's outside my office and said, that's not really how it works. I'm like, yeah, because they want you to work for them. But you've earned your degree. You're a doctor. You're going to build something. You should have it work for you. But again, to get back to your original question, adding technology for the sake of adding technology, or the way most people are doing it, does create anxiety and does create stress. And what we're talking about here is building a system that's going to take the stress and the pressure off and is going to get your practice to work for you.
When you're looking at a practice, what are some metrics that you dissect or look at first?
Well, we look at what their revenue is, and most practices like kind of have this thing where they start the practice, they're really excited, and then they just get stuck on this number, and they're just stuck, and like nothing they can do can break that number. And again, that's because of the way this place was designed. So we really want to, if it's an established practice, we want a 3x, 5x, 10x, and none of that means necessarily more work for the doctor that founded it or for the owner. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It could mean there's more procedures, but it should be in a more seamless and frictionless way. When we start working with a doctor who's going to build a new practice, you don't have those numbers. So we show them what's possible with other doctors. We show them a client we have in Chicago that forever worked at their dad's practice, and the practice was like pinned at 1.8 million. No matter what, that's all it did. And we built this new practice for them, startup. The dad was super concerned. And within the first 24 months, it was doing 3 million, and they were working less time, not more time.
Right.
And they were shocked. They were like, we've worked over here for 7 years, a husband and wife team, stuck at 1.8. They're over here doing 3 with less work, spending more time with their family. And we show people that, and we say, look, this is like what's possible. And if you want, you can call this doctor. And that is the real meaningful work that we do, because these doctors are now practicing smarter. Patients are getting much better care, and there's less chaos. There's less drama. There's less noise in the practice and a lot more clarity about where the practice is going and where you're going. And I get back from our clients that it's created, mental clarity and more happiness for them, because they no longer feel like, a hamster on a hamster wheel. They actually feel like an athlete that is, gaining the proper recognition and reward for the time that they choose to invest. And that's an important thing. Like, they don't have to, they choose to. Because, if you have to go to work to make ends meet, or you have to go to work to pay the rent, that's not going to be a great feeling. It's just not. But if you can have the choice, well, there's a lot of freedom and power in choice, because you can also choose to stay home. You can you can get sick, you can go on vacation, and the practice should still be able to run. And that's one of the big things that we do is, again, build practices that run in and of themselves for the founding doctor. And then when they choose to go to work, that's just sprinkles or gravy on top.
When you mentioned something earlier, it was called outside the box. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so we do a set of talks throughout the country. Right now we have New York, Miami, and LA scheduled. You can find these dates on our Instagram, and they're called Outside the Box. And the idea is doctors will leave their box, they'll leave their practice, they'll come to a great venue. We do the one hotel in Miami. We do the one hotel in LA. In New York, we have this great studio that we use, and for 3 hours, I will basically peel back the curtains on everything that's possible within dentistry and healthcare as a whole. And I'll share my experiences of building some of the world's best known healthcare brands, most desirable brands that patients want. And I'll show doctors how we started and how we got to where we got. And what's so shocking to them is that in a matter of 36 months to 60 months, 3 years to 5 years, the extraordinary growth that we can create, whereas they're like stuck on this number for the last 10 years, thinking like it'll eventually just happen, and it won't. And so these outside the box events are very well attended. They sell out pretty quickly. But it's a great way for anyone listening to this podcast that wants to get a little deeper, a little bit more information. Super simple. You just drop us a DM, say, hey, I'm interested in learning more about your outside the box events. You'll get an invitation. And we really peel back their curtains and show you what's possible. And it's interesting. Young doctors are super thankful. And when I get doctors that have been practicing for 20 years, they're like, oh my God, where were you 20 years ago? And I'm like, I was in college. And they're like, I'm 5 years away from selling. I can't wait to sell, And it's interesting because some of our clients were thinking they were going to sell their practice. And once we built it this way, they were like, oh my God, like it's actually my retirement plan now. It works for me. I'm like, yeah, like that's awesome. That's like such a good feeling to help doctors take their power back and help them regain what they worked so hard for, which is their freedom of choice, right?
No, I mean, what you do is very impactful, whether it's you're beginning your career and opening up your own practice, or like you said, thinking about selling, and it's the tail end of your career. Um, if someone wanted to connect with you, where can they find you? How can they reach out to you?
Just reach out on Instagram. My name's on here, Paul Vigario, and it's literally Paul Vigario. So you just reach out on DM, or the SurfCT main page, which is SurfCT.com, C-O-M. You can also email me, paul@surfct.com. But again, I recommend everybody have an Instagram account, and we're living in a world where you could just take out your iPhone and really connect with anybody. And that's the best way. And we always start with a conversation about where you started, where you are. And when we show you the possibilities, and and you choose what you want. It's really amazing. So that's the best way to connect, would be on Instagram.
Paul, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Ellie, thank you for having me. I had a great time.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow our podcast, write a review, leave a comment. Anything you share with us goes a long way. And if you think a friend will appreciate this podcast, then make sure you share it with them too. Until next time, cheers.